Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at iFi's latest model of Hip Dac. This one is the Hip Dac 3, and this is what the box looks like. There's not a whole lot on the front. On the side, we get a quick shot of features, so X-Bass, balanced output, MQA, Burr-Brown DAC. On the back, we do get some specs, which we will talk about in a minute. And there's something side shot of it, not much there. So this is what it looks like up close, and I think the first thing you notice is they tried to do a color scheme that I think was sort of inspired, or at least would match with the new titanium iPhone. So almost a titanium look to it, not quite in titanium gray, but quite nice, attractive to look at. On the back, you can see they sort of label almost all the outputs and all the features. So if you look at it on the front, on the left side, you've got power match, and then you've got the X-Bass button, and both of those have an indicator light, which you can kind of see there. Then in the middle, you've got your analog volume wheel, and there actually are two LEDs on either side of it, which tell you what it is decoding. And then the 4.4 and then the 3.5 outputs. There's also an IE match. And on the back, you've got the USB-C to grab your music to connect to your computer. And this is to charge the battery, a DC USB-C, simply for keeping the battery charged or recharging it. So let's kind of jump into it, and we'll talk about some of those specs real quick. So as I said, USB-C, 3.5 millimeter, 4.4 millimeter outputs, Burr-Brown DAC, MQA rendering and decoding, and 280 milliwatts, and on the single-ended 3.5 and 400 milliwatts, and 12 hours of battery. And I think the 12 hours is an increase up from Hip Dac 2. That should have been about 8 hours, so this one did get you a bump to 12 hours, which was quite nice. As I said, this one does include some iFi goodies that they've had on other devices. Power match, it's for matching impedance and sensitivity is what they would call it, but at first glance it operates like a 10 dB of gain, high and low gain. X-Bass adds bass, S-Bal or S-Balance 3.5 millimeter output. So their marketing would say all the benefits of balanced output with none of the drawbacks. So no increase in distortion, and you get the benefits of balanced output without having two amplifiers running in parallel to get balanced output. They do it all on a 3.5. Again, that one is pretty hard to at least verify or compare because there is no regular 3.5 millimeter, but it is one of their marketing points and something that they do that is not 100% unique to iFi, but not a common feature to see, that they put that much effort into their 3.5 single-ended output as well. And then there's IE match, and I would call it a more complicated impedance adjustment. It lets you go from standard no IE match is about less than 1 ohm, and with IE match is going to run up to about 4.5 ohms. So my first impression of this guy right out of the box, it's a kind of a Burr-Brown plus some glitter. And I was reading Reddit one night, and someone was making fun of reviewers who talked about amplifiers adding glitter or having glitter. And I'm like, you know what? That's exactly what this one sounds like. So if you're used to, and I had recently listened to Go Bar and Go Blue, and those are Burr-Brown, smooth, musical, relaxed sounding. And the first thing you notice about Hip Dac 3, there's a little extra on top, a little bit of extra glitter, a little bit extra sparkle, a liveliness to the upper range that those two didn't quite have. And I wouldn't call it a Burr-Brown. It's sort of like a Burr-Brown plus in my book. It's not. I wouldn't say it resembled some of their other sets, but there's clearly something extra up there that it still sounds smooth and musical, but that touch of liveliness and sparkle to the treble, I wasn't really expecting it, but it's really super engaging on this set. And it's, again, I wouldn't say it's quite Burr-Brown, but absolutely works here in the way they did it. Second impression, that liveliness that you get in the upper range, it gives you a better stage expansion than you had on Go Bar and Go Blue. And those were really nice devices, but I think after hearing DAC 3, I was like, I kind of forgot about Go Bar and Go Blue. Generally, I was just super impressed with the sound quality on this guy, and I do think it matches the price. And more importantly, it makes your $200 IEM sound like $200, which is really the goal of a device like this. And absolutely why I have a $200 set right here. This is SIMGO's EA1000. And this is a very subtle, nuanced set. You're going from a one dynamic driver, say an EA500, to a 1000. And the difference between the two is all in this subtle nuance and what the passive radiator can do. And you really need a DAC amplifier that can present those details and those subtle nuance differences. And something that's a little bit too warm, it's not really, it's going to mask a lot of that. And so that's why I sort of said this one's just a little bit different. It's not quite Burr-Brown, which may not really show off the differences with EA1000 and how the passive radiator actually works. It's super, super subtle and is very, very cool. But it's not something that hits you over the head as a difference from other sets. And you really need a set that can present detail and nuance in a way. And I think Hip Dac actually does it quite well, better than I thought it was actually going to do. It's kind of interesting, but at the end of the day, that is exactly what you want to have happen. You don't want to spend a lot of money on a DAC amplifier and then you end up not being able to hear the ability to resolve detail or a treble that goes through all the extension. That's not exactly why you want to pay a lot of money. You want something, if you're going to pay money for something, you want all of it, and Hip Dac 3 is pretty close to that. So sound, I would say more Burr-Brown smooth than warm. There isn't really, and again, that's why I pointed to this set. This set, it's not warm either, and you don't get a natural sense of warmness coming from this set that's any different than on my other amplifiers. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a warm amplifier at all, but it definitely has a smoothness to it, and you still has that Burr-Brown smoothness, and it's not topping flat. It's not that cold. It's not that, some people call that boring, but I would call it topping flat. But there's just that little bit of extra on top is the compromise between the two styles, having something that's smooth and not as detailed, or a relaxed amount of detail, and the way they added the little bit on top of it sort of is that compromise between the two styles. And again, I would say they nailed it on Hip Dac 3. It's different than Go Blue and it's different than Go Bar, and it's very, very much stood out to me as that much of a difference, where those two, smooth and musical, didn't really have that sparkle, that liveliness, and that engagement at the top. And it's not far from typical Burr-Brown sound, but then when you hear a little bit of extra on top, there's a different level of engagement with Hip Dac 3 that you didn't get with the other two. And I wouldn't call it brighter, but there is an openness to the sound that comes from that extra bit in the upper range. Darker sets will definitely sound better, but if you have a brighter set, maybe like an EA1000, and you want it warmer, then hit the X bass button. That's exactly what it works. And it works great with most SIMGO sets because they tend to bump the treble just a little bit, and you tend to need a little bit more mid bass. So, push the button, and then you have a magic fix for a more general appealing style on SIMGO sets. So if Hip Dac 3 had no other features, I would still say it's worth $200, but there are other things that hobbyists will like to explore. So right off the bat, this 3.5 millimeter versus 4.4 output, the balanced output, and that obviously isn't Hip Dac specific. Lots and lots of DACs and amp DACs do balanced and single-ended, both in the same unit. But if your device has more power on the balanced output, like these guys do, where it's almost a doubling, there's lots and lots of devices that do the same thing. Your balance is going to be about double the power output of your single. Always buy the balanced cable and try it on a device like this. At a minimum, when reviewers say there's amp scaling on a certain set, perhaps like the EA1000, you have a way to hear it. So always something to try. Never ignore the balanced output because you don't have the cable. Just go buy the cable and get an idea of what reviewers can talk about that. I talk about it. Almost all reviewers talk about having a little bit more power, and when on a set like this, when you double the power, it makes a little bit of difference. So power match, and I would say again, at first glance, it looks like a gain switch. It sounds like a high-low gain switch. Will it be better with more gain? It's possible, and it will definitely come in handy on harder to drive planers, or you like tweaking volume levels. So essentially, you get 10 dB on your volume. You can turn down the volume here. You can turn down the volume on your source. And you can do some fine level tweaking and see which one sounds better with power match on or off. I think they would recommend a power match for IEMs to leave it off. You tend to not need another 10 dB on IEMs. There's enough power here without needing an extra 10 dB. On planers, that's a maybe. But X-Bass, again, iFi's implementation has been spot on past devices, and really no different here. And again, as I said, it's almost perfect for SIMGO sets that are just slightly brighter in the treble. And most people would say, oh, if I just had a little bit more bass, mid bass, I'm going to roll my tips. I'm going to try cables. You go through all this whole series, and what you really need is the X-Bass button, and that tends to work perfectly on sets like this. On this one, again, where I said that this one is very much a subtle, nuanced difference between, what a $200 set should sound like and some of their other sets, I would say the X-Bass didn't actually help here. I like changing the tips. The tips is sort of a even subtler change, and the nozzle then hitting the X-Bass button. The X-Bass button was a little bit of a hammer in this case, and it did fill in the bass quite well, but then you sort of mask a little bit of the nuance that was there in the passive radiator. So normally I would say perfect for SIMGO sets. On this one in particular, it's kind of a maybe for me, and I'll probably just leave it off. But IE match, again, simplistic version of changing the impedance from less than 1 to 4.5 ohms. This will affect lots of sets with multiple drivers in both good and bad ways. There's no way to really predict it. You have to listen to it, try it. I switch amps to do the same, and sometimes it just lands perfectly, and 7 Hertz Sonus was one that kind of comes to mind. You roll from portable amp to portable amp, and there's a very, very subtle difference between the two. And I thought it was impedance, and maybe it isn't, but there was a difference. And so right here, being able to flip the switch for hobbyists, that is a great thing, to just go from less than 1 ohm up to about 4 ohms. So lastly, if you like to see all the LED colors, and this one does a bunch of colors that show up here, you'll have to pull out your title music with MQA. And I think there's actually two different colors for MQA. Then you get some flax, will give you a different color. And then to hit DSD colors for 128 and 256, you will need to run pass-through, no PCM conversion, straight DSD, straight to the box, and DSD 256 works fine on this one. I tried that as well. So that is what I got on Hip Dac 3. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.